When I was younger, I swam, and so I was very used to this concept of like you show up and you're there the whole day.
Yeah.
And you just have events that are spread out. So,
what was your stroke?
so I was a sprinter for sure. My endurance level was not great, but I was really fast, and so I did the 50 and the 100-meter freestyle. I was also on the 100-meter medley. So,
Which the medley. So all four of them.
So all four strokes, yeah.
Okay, so you only did 25 down and did all four strokes over 100?
Yeah, so you have the 100-meter medley, and then you'd have the 200-meter, and then occasionally we would do where I was participating in the where it's a combination of individuals.
The relay.
The relays, yeah. So, so I loved the freestyle, and then I loved fly. Those were my two favorites.
Man, flies, that's the hardest of them all, right?
It's intense. It's the hardest to figure out the rhythm, but once you get the rhythm down, then it's actually not terribly difficult. So as long as you have the right motion, then it's actually really smooth.
Yeah. But did you have a pool in your high school?
We did. We actually had probably one of the best pools in the state.
Yeah. You're making me flash back. So the thing that we have in common, I was born in Salt Lake, born at University of Utah.
Yeah.
We moved when I was 7, but we belonged to Cottonwood High School's pool.
Yes.
I guess you could go... I guess I figured it was just everybody had a pool, and then you kind of find out, well, that's not the case.
Not always.
So you were up in Logan?
Yeah, so I was in the Logan area, so in Cache Valley.
Right.
I actually lived in a small town called Mendon, and we were part of the Mountain Crest High School area. So
yeah. That Cottonwood, that pool was amazing because it had a deep end. Mm-hmm. So they had a diving board that went up to probably not 10 meters, right? Like, I can't remember.
Yeah, it had kind of the high and the low.
Yeah, there wasn't any platforms. I guess they were all springboards.
Cottonwood was a good school.
Yeah.
We competed with them frequently when we were talking about state. So,
So not every high school, though, had their own pool. That was kind of a rare thing, and maybe regionally they would share it?
So the big high schools, many of them did, but not all of them were like up to date.
Yeah.
So our two competitors in the valley were Logan High and then Skyview. Logan, at the start of my high school time, like they had an older pool, and it was actually not located on the same property as the high school. It was actually kind of a split rec center and the high school pool. And then Skyview's was a little bit better, but man, theirs was freezing.
Oh, really?
They must have put ice cubes in there every morning because it was cold.
That was a competitive advantage they had. They probably used to it.
Yeah, no, you wanted to swim fast because you wanted to get out. Yeah, it was intense.
I wonder if, I guess at the time I would have gone to Bonneville Middle School or intermediate, and then that fed into Cottonwood. But I don't know that area has grown so much that I don't know if by the time I was in high school if I would have even gone to Cottonwood. I don't know.
Yeah, even in Cache Valley, I think they've got 2 new high schools since I left, so it's grown a lot.
So the great thing about Cache Valley, for those who are not familiar with Logan, Utah, is you got some big time companies that have come out of there. Crumble Cookie,
yep,
Blackstone, Camp Chef. Like they have the monopoly, if you will, on like backyard cooking.
Absolutely. We had Icon Health and Fitness, so all of your health or all of your fitness equipment, they basically own all those brands.
Really?
Yeah,
that's good stuff. Everybody that I've ever met that's from Cache Valley, I mean, it's like they just stop and they have a moment of like silence, like if I could just go back.
There's this moment. So we jokingly kind of refer to it as Happy Valley, but there's this moment when you enter the valley. So you go through a canyon called Sardine Canyon, and you drive up and you have to kind of crest and go over this thing. And as you're coming down out of the canyon, you'll come around this bend where all of a sudden the whole valley opens up and comes into view.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's this just like this moment where you're just like, I'm home, like I'm back.
Yeah.
And it's great. You can see the whole valley laid out below you, and it's gorgeous.
So I know you're related to Rob Hamilton.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna mention that until about 2 weeks ago, I had run a YouTube short clip of he and I talking about my going to Preston.
Yeah.
On the way back, I was up in Rexburg with my oldest son touring BYU Idaho. Mm-hmm. And then we had like 12 hours to get back to Salt Lake and take a red eye home or whatever.
Yeah.
So we're driving. I'm like, just have this idea like, hey, wait a minute. How close are we to Preston? And so we ended up doing our Napoleon Dynamite scavenger hunt thing, and then just continued down 99 or wherever that road that is.
Yeah.
And that basically, you just go right through Logan.
Leads right into Logan, yep.
And so I don't know. Every time I think of Logan, I think of Preston, and vice versa.
Yeah, and the Napoleon.
But
yeah, Napoleon Dynamite. That was a movement for good old Preston.
I mean, how many miles is that for you? Like 50 miles, maybe at the most.
Yeah, maybe. It's probably a 20-25 minute drive.
Yeah,
it's pretty close.
Was that? I mean, that movie, I guess, was a hit. I think it's more of a cult classic where it kind of caught on after it left the theaters.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But
for us, because there were actually people from Cache Valley that got cast as extras for the movie up there. And that came out kind of in the tail end of my high school career. And so for us, it was big news. It was like, it was pretty cool. But
we just had the sister missionaries over. One of them is from Preston.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I was asking her about that video store where we got the map. And I was just telling her how it's, in small town America, you might still be able to have a video store. And people just come in, and the customer service is off the charts because this person asked for like Mrs. Doubtfire, and the clerk is like, "Oh, well, no, Timmy has that, and Timmy's is supposed to return it by 4:00 today." And they're like, "Okay, well, I'll come back at 4."
Yep.
And I was like, "Wow."
Yeah. So the town I grew up in, Mendon, is, I mean, it was even smaller. So we're probably talking like a footprint of maybe 1,000, 1,500 people. So it really was that everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
So there were no secrets. And, if as a kid growing up, you did something, like word got around town pretty quick about it.
Sure. So the signature, Brent Yonk, I think I may have it. Here's another one.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing that kind of signaturing your own quote, your own thought?
That's, I mean, in the grand scale of things, that's relatively new. And that just comes with, okay, I'm starting to feel more confident in putting my ideas out there. And so probably the last 2 years, I would say. And the thing with most of these is, a lot of these messages you've probably heard before from others. And sometimes you have that sense of like, well, sometimes this feels like a real crowded space. Like, is there room for my voice to add to this area? And I can't remember who it was I came across or who I talked to about it, but it goes back to that concept of, everybody has an opportunity and room to put their voice into this area, because you don't know who it's going to resonate with.
Yeah.
And just because a big name person like a Simon Sinek or an Adam Grant or, said something, it doesn't mean it's going to hit everybody. And so there's always this opportunity for you to add impact to that area and to contribute.
Yeah.
And maybe the way that you presented it and maybe the way that you kind of explained it is going to be something that resonates with that other person. And so, I've found as I've been putting these out that I do get a lot of folks that'll reach out and they'll be like, "Hey, I really appreciate that perspective." And so, but and as I've watched many of your podcast episodes and you kind of talk about, well, am I really making an impact?
Yeah. Like
it can sometimes feel like you're just kind of shouting in a empty room. Like, is there anybody out there that's listening?
Mm-hmm.
But over time you'll start to get those messages, and you'll start to hear from people like, "Hey, that one you really put out, that hit me."
Yeah.
And so,
well, I was actually it's funny you mentioned this because within the last 2 weeks, I've had this aha moment around this.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking with Brian Robinson, the episode I just released. He's like a success coach.
Yeah.
Looks like The Rock.
Yeah.
Big dude. Loves
there.
Country music. It's just kind of funny. We had a good discussion, but I was telling him somehow it came up where it's just we're all somewhat regurgitating, and social media now actually encourages you.
Mm-hmm.
Let me step back. I don't know if you've heard me talk about this. Do you play Jackbox.tv by chance?
I don't.
So there's this game called TKO,
Uh-huh.
And I love it because it actually has. It's like the reason I love Nintendo and a lot of gaming systems is always like the Japanese musical score.
Yeah.
That musical score comes from whatever.
Absolutely.
Anyway, they have this. I just love the soundtrack for this game, but it's this game where like you have a T-shirt and you're designing T-shirts,
Mm-hmm.
and the first round is you do a bunch of artwork, you draw whatever you want to draw.
Yep.
Then in the next round you come up with a bunch of clever like sayings, phrases,
Mm-hmm.
and then you put them together, and then the judges are kind of judging. It's always like if that's 8 people playing, you play from your phone into a server online. Then it's like my T-shirt versus this other one. People judge. Someone wins, someone loses.
Yeah,
it's really fun. But the idea is though that you are just the integrator or the composer saying, "Ooh, this artwork really matches this phrase."
Yes.
Right. But it was someone else's art, someone else's phrase. And now with like social media, you can go on Instagram, I can post something, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to use some other music?" Oh, I guess so.
Yeah.
And it's really like everyone, or hey, just keep using. How many times have you seen like a meme where there's like a cat calling their owner?
Yeah.
And it's the 100th time you've seen it, and like, "Oh, I'm calling my owner because of whatever." Like we're just all regurgitating content, but there's a signature to it because you did it, and you did it a little bit differently than someone else.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the same phone call sound,
Yep.
but now you added a different caption, and therefore it's better than the others.
Yeah.
And so I was talking about how, like, like physics in high school, physics is physics to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's been some advances, but for the most part, if you're going to study physics, you're going to study 90% of the same things. But man, my physics teacher was terrible in high school.
Yeah.
I'd really like someone else to teach me physics.
Yeah.
Same book, different instructor, it might resonate.
Yep.
And I think so.
Well, that's the concept behind like Khan Academy, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Is everybody learned math in school, but for most people, like math was tough and it didn't really resonate. And then you had this guy that was like, well, maybe we can make this more interactive or more fun. And so this idea of math is a crowded space. You've got teachers, professors, like a lot of folks in that space, and he just found a different way to do it, and he pitched it out there, and it resonated with folks. And so
and I would say on the local level, even if you're basically saying something that Simon Sinek said, and you're saying it a little bit differently, it might resonate with me more because I know you, or I've met you, or you're in my leadership Huntsville class, or whatever it might be.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you never know, like how it impacts someone.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I mean, it comes back to, well, what are you really in it for? Right. And for me, I'm in it, like if I impact one person and help that one person connect with what their understanding of leadership is and learning how to apply their leadership, then that's a huge success for me.
Yeah.
Like that's ultimately what I'm looking for. I'm not going into this with the intention of becoming famous or anything of that nature. So I think that intention is also a key element of it.
But I think there's, if I was to wake up tomorrow and see this quote, this is another one thing, like we all kind of need that motivation every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can love your job, things can be great with your family, but there's something about every day. Is that going to continue tomorrow?
Right.
That momentum, if you will, that desire.
Yep.
And I think it's extremely important every day that whatever gets you going, that you tap into that.
Yeah.
Or at least be able to recognize it if you're off. And I might be one of those people like, man, I hope Brent posts something today. I need to pick me up.
Yeah. It's and look, sometimes there are days where it's super busy, and I'm like, I'm not going to get a post up today.
Yeah.
But yeah, to the extent that I can, I definitely try.
This is your new gym?
So this is the gym down at Redstone Arsenal. It's and that's as part of the wellness effort and program that we've been pushing. They've developed this FBI Fit branding, which is really cool. But yeah, real nice gym. My only complaint is having been a swimmer, I'm a little disappointed we don't have a pool.
Yeah.
Now, we didn't have one at JEH. There wasn't one at headquarters. We did have one at Quantico. So it was really nice whenever I got to go to Quantico, I could always hit the pool. But
it's funny, when I was mentioning to you, I had been at National Counterterrorism Center, and their Liberty Crossing is their compound, their headquarters. And they were so proud of the fact that their ops center was designed by the same people like from Disney.
Yeah.
They would always tout that. Like, okay. And then their gym was like patterned after the Baltimore Ravens.
Wow.
And again, it's one of those things where you have like a contingent, like the foreign partners come in town, and there's only so many places you can take them.
Yeah.
And you can take them to the cafeteria.
Yeah.
You can take them to, like, if we don't even have a bookstore,
right.
But if you had a bookstore, and then you go look at the gym.
And you're like, look how
And
cool
they
our gym
really
is.
don't care about the Baltimore Ravens because they play soccer. They play soccer over there.
Yeah. They have a different football. Yeah.
But it was always like somehow everyone was going to be so enamored that this gym was,
Yeah. Yeah.
patterned after the Ravens.
So for us at headquarters, the thing became the Starbucks.
Oh yeah.
So we were very proud that we had added the third largest Starbucks on the East Coast to our headquarters. And so anybody that would come in, we'd always make sure, like, have you seen our Starbucks?
We've seen our Starbucks.
It's just, yeah.
Little things, right?
Yep.
Let's see. What else? Is there anything that you wanted to cover as you came in here today that you're hoping I would ask you?
I mean, so a lot of people will ask me if, like, what was the career progression to getting in the FBI? Did I always want to be in law enforcement? So it's real interesting. I will always share with them, like, I grew up with two law enforcement people in my house. So my dad was a deputy sheriff.
Okay.
So he had worked at the Cache County Sheriff's Office his whole career. And then my mom was an adult probation officer for the state of Utah. And so I'm like, I got to see the full cycle of justice growing up. I was not interested in law enforcement at all. Like, I'd kind of sworn off at an early age joining law enforcement. I was like, I've seen it. I've seen all the elements of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't interest me. But it was, and having two law enforcement people and, as parents, it does shape a lot of your perspective. So we had a lot of really interesting experiences growing up. There's that program out there called, I think it's called Scared Straight, where they'll like take these at-risk kids and they'll like expose them to like what prison life is like. So I had an experience like that.
Did you really?
Growing up with my mom. So she would have to interview inmates who were up for parole and basically assess, like, does the state of Utah think that this person is ready to be reintegrated into society? And so there was one weekend in particular, she had to go on a Saturday to go interview this person that was at the prison down in Salt Lake. And we didn't
down like Bluffdale, like down at that one.
Yep. And we didn't have anybody to provide daycare that day. So she had to bring me and my younger brother with her. So we're riding down. It's about a 2-hour drive from Cache Valley down there. And the whole time, me and my brother in the back seat just doing what siblings do. We're just arguing and fighting. Yeah. And my mom just has had enough of it after 2 hours. And so she pulls up to the prison. We walk in. She goes and she knocks on the window of the bailiff. And she points to this cell, the door that was open. And she says, is that available? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, you two in there now. I want you to think about what you've done. And so we walk in, she closes the door, and like you hear it like lock and everything. And I'm in this whitewashed room with a bed built into the wall, and there's a toilet in the corner, and you've just got light streaming in from this one little window up in the wall. And I'm just looking around and I'm like,
wow,
this place is terrifying. I never want to come back here ever again. Right. So there were all these, so it worked. There was all these little formative experiences like that. But yeah, so that was always interesting.
How long did she keep you in there?
It probably took a good hour and a half.
She went and did her interview.
She went and did her interview, collected her notes, and came back.
Did you get to use the bathroom there in the cell?
There was no urge whatsoever
from your brother
to use the restroom at all. So that was always interesting growing up. But as I progressed in my career, I was working for Cricket Communications at the time. It was 2011 timeframe, and we were kind of in the tail end of the recession. And as many organizations did, Cricket started to take a look at their financials, and they were like, "Hey, we got to start cutting back to meet our numbers and our projections." And so they started looking at markets that weren't producing enough revenue. And I just happened to be leading one of the newer markets. And so we'd only had about a year and a half, 2 years to start growing our customer base. So we hadn't hit those revenue thresholds yet.
Yeah.
And so we got the notification like, hey, we're going to be turning your market over to indirect dealers. And so now suddenly I've got like 2 months to find another job. And so I start looking all over to see what's out there. And it just so happened that the FBI had posted out special agent openings. So I ended up putting in for the special agent position. And the way that the special agent process works is it's a 2-phase process. So phase 1, you're going to take a number of assessments, right? They're going to assess kind of your psychological personality. They're going to do some writing assessments, just get a general understanding of who you are as a person. And then you're going to go through and you're going to do like a visit to the field office, and you're going to learn what a day in the life of a special agent looks like. And then they're going to have like panel interviews, and they're going to assess any specialized skills that you might be bringing. And so, went through the entire phase 1, was into phase 2, went through the interviews, and I was about 3 weeks out from doing the polygraph and the physical fitness test. And they won't do it at the home office. They'll send you to another field office to complete that.
Mm-hmm.
So they were going to be flying me from Salt Lake down to Phoenix, Arizona to complete it at the Phoenix field office. And right as I was at that kind of 3-week area, notification went out that the government was going into sequestration.
Oh, right.
So all hiring was being frozen. And so I got the notification. They're like, hey, sorry, we don't know how long this is going to last. We'll reach out to you, once things clear up. I still needed a job, so we started looking and eventually found a position down in San Antonio, Texas that we ended up taking. But so that was kind of where I was like, okay, I'd sworn off law enforcement, but I need a job. Maybe I'll go do this thing. And then after living in San Antonio for about 5 years, just out of the blue, summer of 2014, I get a phone call. Hey, this is FBI DC. We have a professional staff opening that we're looking to fill. We came across your resume. Would you be interested? Type thing.
Huh.
And so that's kind of the arc that brought me into the FBI.
Real quick, it's interesting you say that, because I remember. So were they targeting you if you had gone through the special agent and there's no sequestration? Would that have been early 2012?
Yes.
That's so interesting, because my cousin was in that last group.
The last group before sequestration hit?
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was because I was doing my football game, and that was the end of it was 2012.
Yeah. So if I'd been just a little bit earlier, I might have been in the same group as him.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I hope you don't mind me sharing this. A little birdie may have told me a little bit about the grind.
Sure.
And I want to, on purpose, because last night I interviewed this lady, Lisa DeFalco from TPG.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, second time I've had her on.
Yeah.
First time, she invented basically the quality assurance industry.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
when you call and it's like, this call may be monitored, right?
Yep.
And her company
Famous
is
words.
like taking off, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's going to be like huge for them, the stuff they're doing. But early in her career, single mother, she was going to work, had daycare for her. Then she would come back or pick up her child from daycare and then go back to work.
Yeah.
And I understand, if you don't mind talking about it,
Sure.
that even when you were in the bureau, it's a big pay cut.
Uh-huh.
You're living in Stafford,
Yeah.
but you were also working, I think, at Best Buy,
Yes.
right?
Yes. When I first got out there.
Grinding it out.
Yeah.
And I think this is extremely important when it comes to making it happen for your family.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there's some short-term pain with certain things, and in the long run, it's gonna pan out. But
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about that grind that you went through?
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously coming out of the private sector and moving from San Antonio, Texas, which is a relatively low cost of living area, very similar to Huntsville, Alabama, going to Washington, D.C., like our cost of living expenses basically tripled.
Wow.
Housing expenses were just super high. So we were really taking a leap of faith in joining the FBI, because we knew not only were we going to take a significant pay cut, we had to move ourselves across the country. So we had to pack up, pay all of the costs to ship ourselves from San Antonio to DC. And it was actually really challenging, because when we first arrived, the place that we had lined up to move into turned out to be like, it was not well kept up.
Oh, okay.
And so we got there, and it literally looked like somebody had been living, like squatting in the space.
Interesting.
And so we were like, well, we're not going to live in this type of space. So on the fly, we had to start looking for housing on the spot. Thankfully, we were able to find a really nice townhome that we were able to get into. But yeah, so on a GS7 salary, which is what I came into in the government, like just meeting the bare minimum for housing, food, like all transportation costs, like it wasn't going to cut it.
Yeah.
And so in the government, obviously it's depending on the role that you have and the work that you have, it can limit your ability to have other types of employment. So
Gotcha.
we do have the ability, and it's easier for professional staff members to put in what we call a secondary employment request. So I had to put in a secondary employment request, and just looking for stuff that was close to where I lived, so that when I finished working at the FBI, I had something secondary that I could do to bring in a little bit of extra income.
Yeah.
And so Best Buy just happened to have an opening. And so, yeah, so I would, after hours and on the weekends, I would work at Best Buy, which was actually fantastic. I got to look behind the curtain there at Best Buy and really learn about their culture and the way that they operate as an organization. And they have done an incredible job of turning around their business model. I got to learn a lot about Hubert Joly, who was their CEO at the time, and kind of his principles that he had installed there. And so a lot of things that I learned while I was doing that side hustle, I was able to take some of the best elements of that and apply it right back into what I was doing for the Bureau. Now, thankfully, I had some really good management in the FBI, and so when I didn't really go around advertising to my coworkers at the FBI, like,
Sure.
I'm working at Best Buy at night. But when my manager kind of became aware of that, he's like, well, we do have other work that has to be done, and we can offer overtime. So at the time, we were doing a renovation on what we call our 7th floor. And it's the literal 7th floor at the Hoover Building, but it was where our senior executives sit. So our director, deputy director, like the top executives in the FBI. And so the deputy director's conference room, so the number 2 person in the FBI, they were renovating that space, and they were going to design a whole new conference room for him. And so we needed somebody that would be able to help contractors that were doing that work access the space. And then you have to stay with them because you're in secure space. So you've got to monitor them, make sure they're not doing anything that they shouldn't be doing. So it ended up turning into I would do my day job from about 6:30 until 3:30. And then I would just walk over to the 7th floor and I would start escorting these contractors in, and they start working on this space. So there were some times that I was at the headquarters building from 6:30 in the morning until about 12:30, 1 o'clock at night.
Wow.
So those were some long days, but I pulled in a lot of overtime during that period, and that really helped kind of keep us afloat that first year and a half that we were out there.
Yeah, and that's they call it escorting. I remember when I first heard that term, and I was like, "What?" And it's just funny how like that terminology can mean one thing for,
Yeah. Well, and in the Washington
connotation.
Yeah, in the DC area around the Hoover Building in the 1970s, it definitely had a different flair.
Yeah.
So.
And then and then obviously you have to be from a marital standpoint, you have your spouse, got to be all in. This is tough, and not going to be around that much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some long hours, but
our girls were really young at the time, and so my wife was staying home with them and helping raise them.
Yeah.
So there were definitely some hard times there and some sacrifices that we made. But
I remember I was did my MBA through Old Dominion, but I was living in Sterling, and it was at a distance learning. It was actually before the internet. It was ATM.
Yeah.
So it was asynchronous transfer mode layer 2.
Yep.
It was this awesome network they had, but ultimately, the internet comes in is far more cheaper, and then they sold that building. But I did kind of like a distance learning thing, but I had class Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturday morning, and I was working full time, and so my 2 oldest were young kids in diapers and sippy cups, and on Saturday they would cry as I pulled away from our townhouse, and I could see them through the storm door, and they would wave to me, or why does he have to leave again? It's Saturday,
That's right.
I got to go to school.
Yep, you got to get it done.
Eventually, this will pay off.
Yeah, it's a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain. Yeah, and there was actually a period there where I was kind of doing 3 things because I'd actually been doing interview consulting as well. So I would actually coach people on how to improve in interviews. That was a little bit easier for me. So I could, on my lunch breaks and stuff, I would cut across over to the Smithsonian. It was the American Art Museum.
Yeah.
It's got a beautiful courtyard space, covered courtyard space in the interior of that building. And so I would meet with people across the whole spectrum, like the doctoral students, people trying to get into the State Department Foreign Service program, trying to join nonprofits, and just sit down with them and help them polish their interview abilities.
Yeah. I'm actually, when I go up to DC, I always fly into National. I don't fly into Dulles, even though our corporate headquarters is next to Dulles.
Yeah.
In part, I tell people I want to fly in and see the city.
Yep.
And drive out of it, and some of it's just see what has changed in any way.
Yeah.
But it's just like, if you're going to be a bureau employee, it's going to mean something when you work at headquarters. No matter where you work, you have to. People always tell you, make sure you get a chance to work at headquarters, kind of the epicenter. You might see the director, but there's a different energy.
Yeah.
But just flying into the nation's capital.
Yeah.
I love it.
And it's surprising how quick you can lose sight of that. Because I first came out to DC and visited when my brother-in-law was working at the bureau, and he was working at Hoover, and so we came out for, I think it was Thanksgiving one year, and so he took us in. We did the whole walk around the Capitol, look at all the monuments, and I was like, this place is amazing. Like, the history here is incredible. And I was talking to him as we were walking, and I was like, man, you must love it every day. You must just like have lunch on the National Mall. And
like no.
And he's like, yeah, no, this is like the third time I've seen it. And I remember thinking to myself, like, man, if I worked here, like, I'd be all over this place. I'd be out and about. And it was interesting actually moving out there. Like, very quickly you're like, well, no, look, I've got an hour commute to get in, an hour commute to get back. Like, I don't have time to waste.
Yeah.
Like, just sightseeing. So what I would try to do, so I slugged, and for people that don't live in the National Capital Region, and even people that don't live like in Northern Virginia specifically,
it's true.
Slugging, they're like, what is that? So it's kind of a legalized form of hitchhiking, and so we've got commuter lots that are stationed along the I-95 corridor, and you would just show up at the commuter lot, and they'd have these signs set up for different drop points in DC. And you'd stand in line, and cars would pull up, and you'd just hop in, and you didn't pay anything. The person that picked up the slugs, they got the benefit of being able to use the high occupancy vehicle lane. But I would purposely get dropped on the other side of the National Mall so that I walked across it every morning. And part of that was just so that I could really spend a little bit of time appreciating where I was.
Yeah.
So every day walking across the National Mall, being able to look and see the National Monument one direction and look and see Capitol Hill the other direction, it just really helped you kind of, again, resonate with that purpose. What am I doing here? I'm contributing to this broader vision, this broader mission of protecting the American people. And and just having those moments, to have that little opportunity to connect, I think was super important.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember not every country has a perimeter security like we do.
No, yeah.
And I remember going into like Langley a lot and go in and feel like this is probably one of the safest places I could work.
Oh, yeah.
And I could be like, right now I feel safe and I'm here, and there's this fence line, and there's guards everywhere, and they got guns. Like, unless they come through the air,
yeah, which they've got other things they'd have to get past.
That, and just the element of patriotism,
yes.
Right? Like, wow,
absolutely,
this is cool.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a few questions.
Yeah,
this is kind of for those that might know Brent, just to see what kind of answers he gives.
Oh boy,
all right. You have a phobia?
Do I have a phobia? I'm sure I do. I'm just trying to think off the
What are you
top
scared
of my
of?
head. I'm not a big fan of like snakes.
Heights?
Heights I can deal with.
Okay.
Yeah. Other things that I'm scared of. So I'm a scuba diver, or I'm a certified scuba diver. I haven't had a chance to go scuba diving for a while, but I will tell you, like, and I'm sure most of America shares this fear. Like, every time you're out in the open ocean,
oh yeah,
and
sure.
you look at the water, like the first thing that always comes to your mind is like, is Jaws sitting right there under the waves waiting for me?
Right.
So yeah, there's always that small trepidation of like, when you jump in that water, is there going to be a shark there waiting for you? I did have an experience. I was 18 going into 19 at the time. And I was scuba diving off the coast of California with my parents. They would, every year they'd go out with a charter, the group of like 30, 40 people, and we'd spend a couple of days out on the water. And you'd chug up and down the Channel Islands and go scuba diving in different spots. And there was this one year where I jumped in, and I was going with my dad, and we were going out spearfishing, right? And so for anybody that's done spearfishing, especially in the California area, you're looking for halibut or sheep's head, things like that. This particular time we were looking for halibut. And the way that you hunt halibut is you stare at the sand and you look for the outline of the halibut. Because what they'll do, they've got their eyes on the one side of their head, and so they'll go down on the bottom and they'll just kind of bury themselves under a thin layer of sand, which for from a predatory standpoint is great because most predators can't distinguish the shape of the fish. Humans, we can recognize and spot shapes, and so you'd just sit there and you'd be scanning, and if you'd see it, you could shoot the spear, and it actually pinned the fish right to the ground. So if you did it right, it was actually a pretty easy catch. But for a teenager, right, young adult, there's only so much staring at sand you can do before you start to get a little bored. And so we were swimming around for about 20 minutes and didn't have any luck spotting anything. And so I was like, I'm done. I'm going to head back to the boat. So I signaled to my dad and let him know that I was going to be heading back. So I turned around and started heading back to the boat. I was probably about, I don't know, by that point we were probably 300 yards off of the boat and about 80 feet down. And I'm about halfway back to the boat, and I see this shape materialize off to the left. Now I'd been scuba diving for a couple of years at this point, so I was used to like dolphins and seals and even whales. So I'd gotten past the trepidation of like there's this large shape moving in the distance. And in California, in the Pacific Ocean, on a good day, your visibility is like 20, maybe 25 feet, and then it gets really hazy and murky. And so I'm looking off and I'm seeing this shape, and I'm not paying too much mind to it, and I keep swimming, and then like it materializes, and you can actually see it, and it's a great white shark.
Whoa!
And I look at it, and I'll never forget, the first thought that goes through my head is like a line from Jurassic Park. Just don't move and it won't see you, right? Has no basis in reality whatsoever. But I'm like frozen just watching this shark come off my left, and it swims right in front of me and keeps going. And I mean, if I had to guess, it was like 14 feet. It was a decent size. It was a big fish.
Wow.
And I just sit there frozen, just watching it swim by. And the scariest part of that experience, though, was when its tail disappeared. So it goes about 25 feet that direction, and its tail disappears into the murk.
Can't see anymore.
You can't see it anymore. So now your mind's going crazy. It's like it's either going to like go beneath me and like breach me, or it's going to go behind me like a velociraptor and come up from behind. So as soon as it disappears, like I'm hauling towards the boat, and I get to the boat, pop out, and like jump onto the back of the deck, and I'm just sitting there like.
But your dad's still down there.
My dad's still there. I wasn't even thinking about my dad. And then, so there was another diver that was part of the group he came up about 2 minutes behind me, and he gets out on the deck, and after he gets some of his gear off, he's like, "Did you guys see that? Did you see that huge shark?" And I was like, "Yeah, it was right in front of me. Where were you?" He's like, "I saw it, and I dove to the bottom."
Oh, wow.
I was like, "Nice. Hanging out to dry." So yeah, so there's a little bit of fear around sharks, but
Sure.
But I've recognized that, most of the fears we have around sharks are not founded in reality.
Wow. Whoa, man. I would love to have been tracking your adrenaline at that point and your heart rate.
It was intense.
And everything else. All right. Other than swimming, what's your other top talent or hobby?
Boy, that's a good question. I would probably say my communication skills.
Okay.
Whether that's verbal or written, and that's something that over time and over the course of my career I've honed quite a bit. But I'm passionate about finding ways to connect with people and finding ways to transfer information to them in a way that they get it and it makes sense to them. And so I've spent a lot of time and effort kind of trying to hone that ability.
Okay. Ski or snowboard?
So started skiing. I started skiing as early as 4 or 5 years old, learning the whole pizza slide and all of that stuff. But as I got into the teenage years, I had to be cool.
Yes.
So I had to convert to snowboarding.
Good.
There was a period of transition, though, where I went from skiing to snowblading, which many people may not be familiar with. So snowblading is like you cut the skis down to almost rollerblade size.
Right.
But you lose a lot of control with that. So it gets a little crazy. So I did a very brief stint snowblading, but ultimately ended up snowboarding. Yeah.
Okay. What mountain were you at?
So the closest mountain to us was Bear Mountain.
Right.
It wasn't the greatest. Look, if you were to compare it to the East Coast, it was glorious.
Sure.
It was
I gotcha.
awesome. But if you were to compare it with like Snowbird or Alta,
Brighton,
like those places were amazing. So anytime we got to go down and go to Brighton or Snowbird, like those places were legit. They
I
were awesome.
love Snowbird. I love how steep it is.
Yeah.
It's so fast.
Yeah, occasionally we'd get to go to like Sun Valley, or we'd get to go to the Teton
Yeah.
range, and those were also incredible.
Targhee.
Targhee, yep.
Let's see. All right, if you were a part of In-Q-Tel now, I think
Mm-hmm.
you might have used to be part of In-Q-Tel, which is basically the Intel's venture incubator type thing. But
Yeah.
what would you invest in if you were given that task right now?
Ooh, yeah. So as part of the FBI, I was what they refer to as, I mean, in the FBI we just called it the program manager of the In-Q-Tel program. But yeah, I mean, there's so much in the emerging technology space. Um, I mean, artificial intelligence, machine learning is there's no doubt that there's going to be a huge impact from that. There's lots of opportunity to invest there. Um, One of the big concerns that we have in the bureau, that I think if somebody can figure out how to do it well, will be a huge win, is how to detect and authenticate deep fake. So this ability to create these very lifelike representations, both visual and audio, of people and their voices and likeness. I mean, that's a space that could very quickly become
Yeah.
like a huge risk, because if you can create a visual or even an audio of somebody that a broad demographic follows or likes, and you can have them saying things that are completely, you know, incorrect or
Yeah.
against, what our values and systems are, like it can have a very detrimental effect. So that would be an interesting space to kind of get into. Other spaces that are equally fascinating to me are around human performance and just biotechnology. Obviously, the Bureau doesn't really have a nexus in any of that,
Yeah.
outside of maybe a couple of very small groups like our hostage rescue team. But the ability to advance human performance and even looking at human longevity, like those would be
Yeah.
some cool areas to get into from an investment standpoint.
I was just thinking, I don't know, it was like about 7 or 8 days ago. Microsoft apparently had moved to a completely like automated news, like they curate their news just completely through AI.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was that story that came out of the Guardian,
Mm-hmm.
and they did a poll because a lot of times there's these polls, right? And
Sure.
it was it had dealt with a lady being murdered,
Mm-hmm.
and the poll was like, how did she die? And so it's kind of like it crossed the line because it's not taking into account the moral side or
Yes.
what's appropriate in the true sentiment of the article, right? It's just be interesting.
Yeah, so the algorithms, right? And if anybody that's watched those programs like on Netflix around social media, like
Yeah.
those algorithms are scary, because those algorithms are programmed not around how do we keep people informed and how do we give them the best
Sure.
view and angle across stories. It's all about how do we keep them engaged.
Yeah.
And so what's going to drive them, to come back and to keep reading and stay longer. And unfortunately, from
Yeah.
a human behavior standpoint, usually that's things that get us fired up and get us upset or angry.
I would imagine from a deep fake standpoint, like I
Mhm.
guess you'll know you've arrived and you're famous if someone's like, "Hey, was that Troy By really on the?
That's right.
Did he really say that?
That's right.
Is that
Yeah.
really him? No, it's a deep fake." Like,
Yeah. If people are deep faking you,
Like-
you've probably done something right. Yeah.
All right. When it's all said and done with your career at the FBI,
Mhm.
how do you want to be remembered?
I mean, ultimately, I want to be remembered as the person who my goal was not to uh, make myself look good. My goal was not to advance my own interests. My goal was to serve the ultimate mission of the Bureau. So I want people to just recognize, like, hey, when Brent was here, like we made good advances, positive advances in the workforce development of the employees at the FBI, and we figured, or maybe not figured out, but we got better at managing change.
Yeah.
Right? It's something that every organization struggles with. That change will be constant. It's not going to stop. It's going to be on all fronts, from technology to our socio-political, environment. And if we want to be effective, we've got to learn how to navigate that effectively. And so, if I can influence the scales in those two spaces of improving the way that we develop our people and in making us more comfortable and fluent at managing change, then I'll count that as a success.
Let me ask you two things related to Huntsville.
Yeah.
Favorite place to take the family to eat?
Ooh, so my kids have just been going on this kind of sushi dive, and so we've tried a number of the sushi places. I think right now Rock and Roll Sushi is still kind of our favorite.
Okay.
But me and the wife, when we go out on dates, we tend to like some of the steakhouses. So we love J. Alexander's out by Trash Panda Stadium. It's delicious.
Yep.
And we also love Char downtown. So, but yeah, there's so many good eats. Favorite place for me to take people, like when I want to just shake things up for them. There's this great place out in Jones Valley, Peppered Pig.
Oh, I've heard of it.
Yeah. So it used to be a food truck. It was just off of Memorial Drive, just outside of, I think, what's the southern, is it Gate 3?
Yeah, that's right.
On the east side.
I think you're right.
And so just, on right outside of Gate 3 off Memorial was this food truck. It was a little old food truck. It was in the back end of a antique mall parking lot. Like not the place you'd expect to find amazing food.
Yeah.
But I just happened to go there when I was down here on TDY back in 2019. And I was just looking on Yelp for a good place to eat. And I just came across this and it was close. So I was like, I'll give it a try. And I had all of the, I pulled up and I was like, this is it. I was like, what is this place? But I extended a little bit of faith and I tried it and it was incredible.
Yeah.
And so when I got down here, that would be one of the first places I would take people. Like, hey, we're going to go to this place. You're going to feel like you're about to get kidnapped, but just go with me here.
Just trust me.
Yeah. And I'd take these people over there, and every time the reaction was almost always the same. They're like, Brent, where have you brought me? And then they try the food, and they're like, this place is legit.
Oh, man, I can't. I got to try it.
So it's done well enough that they've opened the brick and mortar over in Jones Valley now. Real nice place, looks gorgeous. I'm a little sad because now you don't have to go through that experience of being like, what is this?
I got you.
So
yeah,
but they've expanded their menu offerings. The food is just as good. They've added some additional options. It's an awesome place to try.
What about entertainment wise? What do you guys like to do?
Yeah. So, sports is great. We love going to Trash Panda games when we get the chance. We definitely want to try some of the other sports here in the area, whether it's Havoc or whether it's the new soccer league.
Yeah.
So we definitely enjoy that. We love a good movie. And so we tend to go to the Cinemark, over in Bridge Street, catch a good movie there. And then eventually we absolutely want to get to, and this was one of the things that I'll attribute to Leadership Greater Huntsville, is start going and seeing some of the concerts and some of the shows, whether it's, downtown at the Von Braun Center or whether it's out at the
Orion.
At the Orion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so much to do.
There is. It's a ton. It's great. And that's one of the things that whenever we bring people from DC, even like stalwart, I'm not leaving DCers, and you take them around and you show them all of the options down here, they walk away and they're like, okay, Huntsville is a lot different than I was expecting.
Every time, right?
Yep.
Another convert.
Yep.
Any final thoughts or shout outs?
No, I mean, it's been a privilege to be here. I'm grateful that you gave me the opportunity. And, there's tons of things I'm sure we could dive into, but I appreciate the opportunity to chat for a little bit with you today.
Yeah.
So definitely appreciate that.
I'm always amazed at, you think in, almost 2 hours now?
Yeah.
There's so much we didn't get into that we could.
Yeah.
But absolutely. At the same time, I like being able to allow you to expound as much as you want on some topic, right?
Yeah.
Not feel rushed.
No, absolutely.
So, anyway. Well, Brent, appreciate it.
Yep.
All the best. Happy holidays.
Yes.
And,
to you as well.
And we'll be in touch.
100%. Yeah.
I'm going to want an update on different things, and we can dive into some stuff. And maybe from time to time, if something does really come up related to the FBI, we'll have you in and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, no. Well, and there's some books on the horizon that that's,
good.
That's one of my professional goals, is to get some books out there. So
good.
I've got a couple of things that are in draft right now.
Excellent. Well, all the best.
Thank you so much.
Say hi to Rob for me.
Yeah, will do.